Okay, we're live. We're doing episode 4 of the Coffee Expeditions podcast. I've got my good friend Larry Clarkson. We've known each other for probably well over like 28 years almost.
I think so, yes, since '96. I think.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. So Larry's a coworker. We worked as firefighters together for a long time, and before that, you played in the NFL and the CFL and had professional football career. Do you mind maybe just introducing yourself for the viewers and watchers, listeners there, Larry?
Sure. My name's Larry Clarkson. I grew up, in Abbotsford, and after high school, went down to the States University of Montana to play football down there, and then, I had a middling, NFL and CFL career before I decided to move on, into a new phase of life. And that's, when we met, when I got on the fire department.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's one of those things where, having met you and having known a few other professional athletes, always struck with you over the years, how humble you are. And it's something that I've drawn upon, as a friend that, I always remember calling you my Zen, because things would be going on at work would be like a little bit, maybe a controversial topic or a tough call. And you're always so even keel and calm. And I kind of wanted to talk about that when, as we get into things, because I wondered, like, was that something that was natural for you or that you picked up through football years, or, it's an interesting thing that not a lot of people have, right? Where you're able to stay calm under pressure and whatnot.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of, my personality and the influence of, coaches and my parents and, other individuals in my life, and also really sitting back and being analytical and looking at the people who aren't like that, and we've all had those coaches or captains or whatever who are losing their minds. Right. And, and you're like, if you're self-aware enough and you see that effect on yourself, and how, you start to, get yourself out of control when everybody else. So it was always something that kind of came naturally. I mean, I was probably a very, I guess, low emotion football player. I wasn't one of those guys, smashing heads on the sidelines, trying to get yourself psyched up, to get angry or whatever. I was a much more analytical player. But I also, the real positive, men in my life, leadership wise, were all very, very calm, under control, little emotion, really.
It's interesting because that's something that I'm fascinated with is leadership. As like I'm trying to study, like Jocko Willing, he's helped me out enormously just understanding leadership principles because I didn't really have anything to go by. Yeah. And it seems to me as professional athletes that the ones that I've met, they've had those role models often in their life. Not saying all pro athletes, but or all experiences are the same. But it seems like, especially if you're on a team sport enough, you're going to see those leaders that are really, really good. And you can try to like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be like that guy, but I do want to be like this other individual that's calm and whatnot. It's not, I think with leadership, I always used to struggle with the idea is leadership naturally born. I think there is a little bit of that, but I do feel with leadership, you can improve yourself. You know what I mean? By observing and thinking about it and trying to learn the principles of that. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's an always evolving thing. And we're not born with it necessarily. I know that, especially with the fire service, we have that evolution that's quite good, where you've got 20 years or, it was less than that for us before we were officers. But, if you're paying attention to the job and you're looking at, people and calls and you just want to pick from here and from there.
Yeah.
And so, I can remember individuals back to when we were rookies, John Voice was a captain that always was pretty calm dude. And absolutely. I can always remember just this mind-blowing episode where we were on this big call. It was a natural gas leak. We had to evacuate a school, I think. And it was just chaos and everything. John turns to me and I'm like a 1-year guy, maybe not a probie, but pretty low down the totem pole. And he's this grizzled old vet. And he goes, Larry, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And it was just like, what?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what is he doing? And that stuck with me for my whole career. And that I never, ever, had that arrogance of I know better than everybody else, because I didn't.
Yeah, it's a huge key point, I very much try to operate the same way. I've done the same thing. I had an electrical problem. It was in a bus loop where there was an underground electrical fire, and I had one of our new guys. He was an electrician. He'd only been on 6 months, and I'm like, you stay with me, because we all have experiences that are beneficial. And when you're on a team, you want to use everyone's input. You might not be able to act on everything, but to have that input, I think, is so much better than, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do and go do it and don't say anything, because now you're shutting people down that might have great information. It could be a safety concern. It could be expertise, because you don't know everything. And did you find, so when you were in, obviously playing high level football, did you find it was similar there, where as a team aspect, people work together and had that communication, or was sometimes yes, sometimes no?
Well, the really good teams did that, right? It just, you look back and you see, man, the really good teams I had a chance to be on were, the coaches were calm. Really? The players were calm and working together, and awesome. Putting in extra work after practice, and that it wasn't let's amp the emotion up more and more, and you were doing the little things right all the time. And Bill Walsh always had this saying, is perfect practice. He didn't want to put 3 or 4 hours into a practice, right? Every day. Like you said, that's a waste of time, because if you're doing it wrong, then, but he always wanted to make it perfect. But if after an hour, the practice was great, all right, boys, that's it.
That's awesome.
To the showers, right? Yeah. And so that, not that I was there that long, but I mean, that just some of those memories, and watching Hall of Fame players like Jerry Rice or Joe Montana stuff, and the professionalism and the work that they put in, and they weren't degrading people. They weren't, and San Francisco had a unique policy, because every sport team that I ever played with, would have a rookie. Hazing's a wrong, that's what it was, but it was, hazing's a politically incorrect word.
So now it's an initiation.
Yeah, initiation that everybody did, and that was fine. I gotten up and had to sing in college and at the cafeteria, we all did it, but at San Francisco wasn't there. That wasn't there. That was, their policy was that you're on the team, you're an equal, there's no, you're not treated any differently. Right. And
interesting.
So, and he would chew out, the highest level guy. Bill Belichick is famous for that now, where he would chew Tom Brady out in practice and just rip him like he would the rookie receiver who, was making mistakes. So, the really, and I haven't played for all coaches, but a lot of successful coaches seem to have that trait where, you treat everybody the same. There's no favorites. There's no, special.
And that's really hard to do, because, I would imagine for someone like Bill Belichick with Tom Brady and his level of, incredible performance, it's pretty hard to not say, hey, Tom, no worries. You got this or whatever.
Yeah. You've won 6 Super Bowls. It's okay. Or 7 or whatever. Yeah.
And then you've known him a long time. He's a friend, and, even though he's a player under you as a coach. And so I think, though, if you can do that, and that fairness comes through, then everyone sees it, and then everyone's hopefully pulling in the same direction, versus, oh, well, this guy gets favoritism, but he's harder on me, or whatnot. The other thing, one of the things I took away from, so much from Jocko's teachings, I always say, you can't go too far wrong if you do what's best for the team first over yourself first. Did you find that was a common theme as well through football? Or
once again with the successful teams, I can remember in the CFL, my first year with the Lions was a really successful year. We had a veteran team that I came into as a rookie and was accepted into it started right away. We went right to the Grey Cup. We lost the Grey Cup, but that here or there, it was a really close game. And that team was really tight. We're veterans. The veterans are, were going out for dinner after, like everybody bonded together. But then things fell apart, and it was different things. Players got traded, cut. Salary issues were huge in the CFL, right? If you were making too much money, you got released, even if you were starting veteran or whatever. It wasn't like the NFL that had that blank check mentality, and so it deteriorated over the next 3 seasons to a point where, we were. I think we had 3 head coaches in 3 years or something like that, and so they're just bringing waves of other players in every week, to compete to try and replace you, and I'm not whining, because that's just the nature of professional sports. But what happens then is that now it's your livelihood, and there's no guaranteed money. It's not like you're sitting in baseball or hockey and it's like, well, if you don't like me, coach, then give me my $8 million or $5 million or $4 million, and I'll go to junior or whatever. The farm system. There's none of that in football, and and that happened to me after into the 4th season, and then all of a sudden I'm on a plane to Calgary, and I'm like, well, what just happened? I was at the pinnacle starting in the Grey Cup a couple years earlier. And now
you're off to Calgary.
They released me, and I'm picked up by Calgary. And then, and then it just, it changed my whole outlook on things at that point, because, when things get bad, you start to look out for yourself, and so, it's something that you really have to be aware of. So.
It's interesting because if you're having like that much staffing changes, that much coaching changes, it's really hard to build and create momentum for that team, because like you said, it's the little things and building up. So now if you're having that much change and turmoil and you're trying to work towards a championship, that's, I would imagine, almost impossible, like, unless things just somehow click and everybody just figures it out. But I don't think it's that easy when everyone's that good at that, at the highest level. So you've got to really pull together.
I've had a taste of it from the coaching side of things, and we won a provincial championship with my son Tom in grade 12 when we won the provincial championship for football. And we worked on that team right from when they were in grade 9. We had this incredible group of kids. I always laugh about this because you're talking about percentages of athletes, right? Because we always, 99% of most athletes don't have it, right? Like, you got that 1%. Well, in grade 9, the first team meeting we have, 4 dads walk in, and they're all 6'6", and they're all played college sports, and stuff like that, and so we know their sons all have potential anyway. But that's beside the point. But the staff that we had, and we rode those kids right through the grade 12, and it was a similar thing. We were all calm coaches, but we had no favorites or whatever. I pulled myself from coaching my own son, even though I was, as more qualified than anybody in the room.
Sure.
But we had to bring another guy in to coach the offensive line, because I couldn't coach him properly and still be dad, right? Because it's just too hard, right? And
that's so wise, because I saw that a little bit in soccer, where that you would see that potential, even if it wasn't happening. The optics were like as favoritism to that coach son or
coach the flip
daughter.
side, where you destroy your relationship with your kid that he grows up.
Which is ultimately the most important thing at the end, I think, right? Like,
and my son was one of those 1%ers who had the physical gifts to go on to something higher, So
and so when you started in, like, or was it early on, because you played sports pretty much your whole life, right?
Well, my sports career is very unique, because I sucked through my youth, right? I tried hockey, I tried baseball, I tried soccer, and I just didn't have, I was this giant gangly kid,
right? Yeah,
and I was fully grown at 13, right? I mean, I'm 6'8",
13
basically.
years old.
And the only sport, well, even lacrosse was really hard for me because
Sure. Yeah.
I was so much bigger than all the other kids that when I would hit them, they would crumple into a ball and cry, and I'd get a roughing pass. So I'd spend most of the game in the penalty box because kids were just crumpling down and that. And so I stopped playing, when I was 8 or 9, I think, lacrosse, and so I was struggling athletically. And then there was a couple of these aha moments where I walked into a junior high in Abbotsford in grade 8, and all of a sudden this man comes running up to me and says, "Who are you?" And my name's Larry. He said, "No, where have you come from?" I said, "I was at, Margaret Standerson Elementary, and he's like, "You're playing rugby."
Oh,
and
wow.
I was like, "Oh, okay."
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
And I'd been a basketball guy. I shouldn't say that I wasn't good at basketball, but I wasn't great at basketball. I was a giant dude, in elementary school that could just turn around and, dunk on an 8-foot net. Right. But rugby opened this whole new world to me, athletically, because I could run pretty well at that point. And, I was 6'8", I was only like 215 or something, like 220, but still
how
a big dude.
How old were you at that point?
13 or 14 or whatever I was. Right. And rugby allowed me the aggression that had been limited to me, all through sports.
And other sports, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
And all of a sudden, like, I can tackle these dudes. I can, and that's good.
Yeah.
Like, it's good. And so I fell full into basketball and rugby, and those are my sports. Right. And I, trained and we ran all the time. And by grade 10, like, the success that it had given me confidence wise, and I was scrimmaging with the first division men, in Abbotsford, and I was under the wing of this coach who was he was from Scotland, and he had already set up that I was going to go and do like a school in Scotland
for rugby.
Oh,
wow.
And one of the men that was mentoring me too from the men's team, he was playing for Canada, like, as a rugby player and stuff, and everything's looking great. And I finished grade 10, and then all of a sudden, at that point you went 8, 9, 10, grade 8, 9, 10 in Abbotsford, and then you went to the big school, Abbotsford Senior. And then once again, it was like deja vu. I'm walking down the hallway the first day, and all of a sudden this crazy looking guy comes up and he says, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, my name's Larry." And, "Well, I'm the football coach, Bill McGregor." And he says, "You got to come out to practice." And this was like 5 days before the start of practice in grade 11. I'm like, "Okay, sure." And by the end of that year, I quit rugby, and the coaches just freaked out, because they had all these big plans and everything, right? And
they would have been.
I was going to play for Canada and all this stuff like that. But but the man who was mentoring me, and I'll always bless him, because, big time guy, he was playing for Canada, but he had a regular job. And he said, "Larry, listen," he says, you're good enough. You're going to get a scholarship to the States. You're most likely going to get to the CFL and stuff. He says, "I'm playing for Canada at this point, and I have to pay for my own airline ticket to go to the World Cup."
Interesting, yes.
So he says, "There's no future financially for you. You'll have the pride of playing for Canada at that time." It's different now. I mean, that's
I think so.
And so I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'll focus on football and basketball."
Interesting.
And so I was a multi-sport guy the whole way through. Right? There was none of this sports specificity with me or anything like that. And football just evolved. But before my grade 12 year, U.S. schools were, approaching me, and, and it just morphed. But, just to talk about my own career, I mean, I had an insane work ethic, but that's common, right? I mean, there's lots of athletes who have an insane work ethic, but I was that. Without sounding arrogant here, but at that less than 1% of the population,
the perfect combination,
the height, the size, the athleticism, and so when you combine those two, you will have an opportunity. It's not guaranteed, of course, but lots of people with great work ethic and strive to be frank, but you just don't have it, right? And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I've spoken to a lot of families over the years who've
Yeah.
come to me about, oh, my son's really good at football, and stuff, and
Yeah.
it's hard to say, like,
Yeah.
if you're getting offered by a Canadian school, take it. I mean, you're not,
Yeah.
you don't have it.
It's interesting because I'm recreational in pretty much everything I do in terms of sport, but I've been lucky to play recreationally with some ex-professional athletes in like hockey, a little bit in jiu-jitsu. I've seen the pros in like triathlon, and when you see that up close, you realize, oh, that's why you get paid money to play this sport.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see in person. And I think sometimes people haven't ever had that experience, and they kind of, maybe you can have a bit of a false dream there. It's like until you see it. And that's one thing I was going to ask you as we move along here, but it's a good time to maybe touch on it. When you were in the CFL and the NFL and University of Montana, were there some times where, like, you're surrounded by all these incredible athletes, these stud players? Was there times where, like, oh man, like that guy blows me away?
Well, I'll tell you, I was thinking about this the other day after you had asked me to do this. And I always remember really questioning my, how good I was. I was at the NFL Combine, and so there's the top, I don't know what there was, 18 to 20 offensive linemen in the country. We were all, all Americans, all this stuff, lots of accolades, and it was different a bit in the 80s because we didn't have computers, and you couldn't like look up, you didn't know a lot about other guys.
Sure, yeah.
But we're all big dudes, right? I mean, we're all 6'4" plus, we're all 320 plus, we're all bench pressing, 225 25 times or more, like all this stuff. But there's one guy, and he was the dude, right? Like he was
really.
His name was Randall McDaniel, and he was a offensive guard out of North Carolina, I believe. And he wasn't obviously like, he wasn't bigger than us. He was like a 6'4", 320, guy. But when you watched him, it was like we're all sitting there, I mean, we're the elite, and we're sitting there with our jaws wide open, right? And here's Randall, and he runs a 4.8, and he bench presses 37 reps with 225. And his vertical is almost 40 inches at that size. And so this is a world-class athlete, no matter what size, and he's that big. Wow. Randall goes on to a 14-year career, and he was elected to the Hall of Fame.
Wow.
I don't know how many years ago now, but he was the dude, right? And so he, that made me realize is that, okay, this pro thing is going to be really hard because you've got limited rosters. There's never been like a league, like a sub league, or for the NFL, right? They've played around with Europe and stuff like that, but they don't send their top backup guys there or whatever. And that was kind of the first inkling of like, I'm going to have to now have some luck, injuries and get an opportunity or whatever to prove myself, because man, every year there's a whole bunch of us coming in every year. Yep. And that's what ended up happening. I hung around for a bit, got, never played in a regular season game, made a bit of money, all this kind of stuff. But, I never had that break, I never had that like, oh, somebody goes down in the playoff game and I'm in, and then I get my name, whatever. And after 2 years, there's two generations of players that have come again, year after year of all these stud guys. And so now you're just an afterthought, right? So, no, we're moving on to the next, and I'm on, I'd been drafted by the Lions, when I came out of college. And so they had my rights, and then, I came back to the Lions.
Oh, right on.
So that even at that point, I realized, oh, wow. And I've struggled, emotionally with my football career, because I felt disappointed, at certain points. And and when it ended the way it did in the CFL, I felt disappointed and kind of embarrassed, because I had always thought that I was going to be this, 10-year veteran or, whatever. Yeah. But now when I look back, it's like the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was only making like 60 grand a year in the CFL.
Right.
And then some of the guys that I had played with in the CFL, Jamie Buis and Glenn Leonhard, and that they had left the Lions a couple years before me, had gone and gotten on with Burnaby Fire, and
I
so I'm
see.
talking to them, and they're like, "Dude, you got to get on this, man.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
You're not going to play the rest of your life. You got to get out now. Like, I'm
Interesting.
making more money than you now as
Yeah.
a 3-year guy or 4-year guy at
Interest.
Burnaby Fire." And so that was the first time I'd ever thought about the fire department.
So that's what kind of gave you that spark to go that route.
Yeah, and then it helped my transition because I was able to move into a great career, right? I've lived the dream of little boys where I was a football player and then a fireman, and I haven't had a real job in my whole life. Right?
Yeah, that's amazing. But I mean, one thing though, like that I wanted to touch on, I know we've talked about this before, is when you went to University of Montana, I remember you distinctly talking about setting goals and having discipline. Is that something that's correct? Like that, as you were getting there, you were looking at like kind of quarterly, like, okay, I've got to hit more weight, or is that kind of something that was a big part of that?
I was always a pretty honest person with myself, and I would take the coaching, I would take the advice, and I knew going in, like, I mean, you go into your first day of college and you're getting the testing done, and you're like, holy crap, like these guys are putting up some big numbers.
Yeah. And I can imagine.
And cool. I can't survive that. Right. And so I took a red shirt year, my first year, which, you have that 5 years to play for in American college. Right. And so they just said first day, said, you're not ready, like you're not, you're not even going to travel. You're not, like you're just not ready. And so you're going to eat, get in the weight room. You're going to be on the practice, on the scout team, and learn. And, every time I would take that on as, I'm going to make myself the best, of this, and, and I'm going to challenge the starters by being the scout team guy, and I'm going to get them as good, as ready as I can. And then just lived the football, and sometimes to the detriment, like academically and, things like that, because it was more important to go, get my squat workout in than to go to class or, whatever, and so, it was a single focus, that it did turn into success. But then once again, coaching changes can also be to a benefit, right? And so we had a staff that had recruited me, had given me my scholarship, had made me a starter my second year. I shouldn't really have started, but we weren't on a very good team at that point. And so they're like, okay, we're building for the future. Larry, you're going to start as a freshman, like your second year freshman. And I wasn't ready. I mean, I was getting ragdolled out there by men, and I'm 18, and and there's these 22-year-olds just jacking me up, right? But it was the best thing for me because it was a learning lesson. But then that staff got fired, and I still had 2 years left. But then one of the most influential men in my life, Don Reed, came in at that point, and once again, another guy like Bill Walsh, just calm and honest, and he would tell you when you're not doing well, but he's not in your face yelling and stuff. He said, no, you need to and he just believed in me, and everything went sky high that year, and all of a sudden I got on the national attention thing, because of my play that year, right?
That's amazing. Like what I was thinking about, I had a bit of a, you could call it maybe a little bit rougher childhood and upbringing, and I had some really influential people in my life. Whom I call my mom was growing my aunt. She's massive, but then when I got in the fire service, because I was, pretty wild, coming out of high school, and I got lucky to get in the volunteer fire department. And there was guys in the volunteer fire department that were key influential people in my life that really turned me in a great direction. And I think, I wish that would happen more for more people that are struggling out there, to have those key people and also have the ability to take and value what they say. Sometimes you don't know, it's easy to dismiss someone when they're giving you some advice, whatever. But if you can do that, man, it can just change your life right around. I know it did for me. Like getting into the fire service was the biggest blessing in my life, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young kids nowadays aren't even having that opportunity
Yeah.
because we're not interacting. There's not that interaction that was, the thing.
Yeah.
And kids' sports is so different now than, what it was for, when we were growing up, that you played sports and your parents wanted you to learn teamwork and, how to persevere and stuff. Now it's like everybody wants their kid to be,
Yeah.
the dude,
Yeah.
I keep saying that term, but
Yeah.
they all think their kid's great and, this and that. And I'm going to move them to Surrey or I'm going to move them to Langley or,
Right. Yeah. It's
and it's wrong because, I mean, once again, I mean, that's all we should be looking at, with sports and other things that from the childhood is like developing qualities that will get you through life. Because even though I was who I was, I still had to work for 25 years, to get a pension,
yeah, sure.
like
Yeah.
we're not sitting around by the pool for, after I turned 30,
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen. Right. And so, you know, it, we, our kids need to have experiences so that they can grow. And
100%.
and that's one of the reasons, people would ask us when our two youngest boys went off to play college football and they're like, oh, aren't you going to send them to UBC so they're home? And I said, no, because I said, that's where they're going to learn. Right. And they had different levels of success in college now, but they came out, as college graduates and they were men when they came out, right? They had faced, hard times and
Sure.
ups and downs and
Yeah.
had teammates and, and we weren't there to hold their hand or,
Yeah.
talk,
Yeah.
and so, and now they've got their careers and are doing well and stuff. And that's what should be about. Right. And,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be just sports, but it's
sports is, as my daughter says, like they both played, locally kind of fairly high level soccer. And it was great for them. They got like so many life lessons out of that. And one of the, when we first started, the same thing as parents, you get that, maybe they're going to go somewhere, be some, and I remember one of the distinct moments that sort of like, and my girls did great. I was very proud of them. But this one gal I'd been hearing about, her name was Jordan Heidema, I believe her name. And she's everyone's talking about how incredible this player is. I didn't know who she was. She's the same age as my daughter. And they were doing a fitness testing where they kind of do like, sprint tests. And like this one is like, it's faster and faster. It's like 20 yards out, 20 yards back, a little break, and it gets quicker and quicker. And she was doing it with the older girl. And I didn't know who this girl was. And I see her and I'm thinking, I wonder if that's the girl, because she just had an aura of confidence. And she's with the older kids and she gets going and like blows them all the way. Like all the parents stopped, all the coaches stopped to watch this. And she was 13 years old, I think, roughly. And I was like, oh, that's an entirely different.
Yeah, that's
athlete.
A national team player potentially or whatever.
And I think she went national team at 16, played. I think she's still playing professionally. Just an incredible, my daughter was lucky to just play a little bit with her, and it was impressive to watch. And that was an eye opener. And I think, when you have that eye opening kind of like moment, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what, the difference between like kind of maybe where your kid is and where like the elite professional or child might or athlete might be.
And sometimes it's a blessing, I think, for individuals that they're not good enough, because then there's not those expectations, right? And so, I'm glad in some ways that my sons didn't reach a pro level because, man, like one's a police officer here in Surrey, one's a firefighter. Like they're in their 20s and their careers are set up, and so, it's like, man, if they had done what I was fortunate. I was 30 when I got on the fire department. And at that time, I was a bit old, and they didn't have any serious injury, and so in some ways I'm thankful that they got the experiences they did, but then it was done, let's move on. They had new goals to go after, those kind of things,
moving into their careers. And that's an interesting thing. Like to say that emergency services is in your family is an understatement right now. Like you got yourself, career professional firefighter, and then each of your sons, like one's in fire, one's in police, and one's in ambulance. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. Like I think they all, grew up, listening to me coming home and just talking about my days. And I think, they wanted that variety that their jobs bring, and the 4 on 4 off, and now it's 24s for the the fire guys. But I think they were all looking for, they saw the lifestyle, they saw like none of them are greedy, I want, to make it, $1 million or whatever. They know that the lifestyle that we lived on, with those salaries was really good. And so, and we never pushed anybody, anyway. Right. I mean, it's funny with my son, Tom, because I brought him in for a day at the Hall 3 one day, and him and Matt both came in. They were both college kids at the time, and we had a great day. And I had this like beauty crew. Like, I mean, just Eric Wilson, and like it was just on and on.
Solid
just
guys,
fun and optimistic and energetic and stuff. And so we had this great day and ate food, and we're putting, they went up in the ladder. I shouldn't maybe say this because it probably wasn't legal, but they and at the end of the day, my youngest boy Matt, he's like, Dad, I want to quit school. I want to become, he's 20 at the time, and I want to quit school. I want to become a firefighter. I said, no, you finish playing football, get your degree, And Tom's like, I don't know, and he's the one who ended up being a police officer. So he was, so I was like, how could you not want to be a fireman after this day, right?
Right. So it must make for some interesting conversations.
Well, there's a lot of rivalry stuff.
I'm sure,
we're...
Well, and your other son is a high level ambulance, right?
Yeah, he was a critical care, or he is a critical care paramedic. He's working out of Salmon Arm right now, not as a critical care, but he's a specialist, like an ALS specialist position. So
did he work on the helicopters?
Yep, yeah, he did that for a couple of years, and he's got a family. He's got 2 sons. And they just wanted to change the lifestyle and get out of the Lower Mainland. So he took this position in Salmon Arm, and they, sold their little rancher here in the Lower Mainland and bought a farm up in Enderby. And,
awesome.
So So I mean, I don't like it that they're that far away, but it's
nice lifestyle,
a dream. It's a dream move for
one of the things that I'm getting closer to retirement here, and the biggest thing I always say I'm going to miss is the guys and the being around the kitchen table. And I imagine for your sons, being around emergency services people, there is that team aspect that they would have had in their sports and whatnot. That's something that I'm going to greatly miss. Did you find when you went into retirement that was a bit of a tough transition?
There definitely was. I mean, my timing was not great in some ways because COVID started basically when I left. It was just starting, and so that stopped travel plans that we had for us and things like that. So we didn't do that first year and a half. I guess was pretty quiet. My wife my wife retired not much after me, and that, so we were doing a lot together. But it was a slow transition into retirement at that point. But we, I still have contact. The guys come play some golf sometimes with the guys, and that. But you do need to also broaden your horizons when you retire, right? And so too, you can't stay in the past. And so, but that definite. I keep saying that. I miss some of those guys. I miss the meals. I miss the. I don't miss any calls. I mean, other than I'll reminisce about a big fire or something like that, and go, oh man, that was really cool.
Yeah, that was exciting. And, we did a good job and helped a bunch of people. The one thing that I find with the fire service is that at least in our fire department, is everybody brings some level of expertise of whatever they're interested in. So. I always say one of the benefits is say you want to be a mountain biker. There's guys that'll teach you how to be a mountain biker. You want to be a hunter. There's guys that'll teach you how to be a hunter, and on and on. So it's a pretty special place to be. But
there's nothing like it, right? I mean, I'm necessarily going to say the police and paramedics. They're a different breed, and they don't have quite that teamwork. I mean, my son's working out of a station in Salmon Arm that's got 7 or 8 people on shift, so they have some of that, right? And then Tommy's got friends in SPF and that, and that. So I mean, it's not like it's a solo journey for any of those guys.
It's been definitely an amazing time being in the fire service. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on, but we'll come back to it. But when you're going through, University of Montana, NFL and then CFL, did you find a stark difference between the games, from university football to NFL to CFL? Because I obviously understand football, but I'm kind of lame and I'm not an expert by any means. But I've heard that there's quite a difference between NFL and CFL.
Yeah, because what the basic thing is that they're two different games. I mean,
Interesting.
you're not going to bring up an NFL team necessarily and just crush a CFL team if you're playing CFL rules on a CFL field, because they're different games. And most of your CFL guys are, a lot of them are as good as the basic NFL guy. They're just a little bit, they didn't fit the guidelines, right? They weren't big enough, maybe, this or that or whatever. But, and I'd seen NFL guys come up and just get cut after a day or two,
Really?
that played a little bit because they just weren't built for the CFL game.
I see.
And yes, they're the elite of the NFL, or it is the elite of the NFL. I mean, they'd be dominant anywhere, and Jerry Rice running on a CFL field with all that room, you're never going to, you're never going to stop them, right? And they couldn't stop them in the NFL. But, the NFL is a power game in a vacuum, where everybody's just grinding and smashing and, and you're just wearing people down, right? And there's not a lot of blowouts in the NFL, right? You're just trying to, win the small battles and beat. Where CFL, you're just throwing all over the place. And that's where a guy like, Doug Flutie or whatever, great talent, right? Matt Dunnigan, those guys could play anywhere, but they didn't fit the NFL because they're 5'10" or whatever.
Right.
And they,
as a quarterback.
So you're sitting in a tight NFL pocket with a bunch of 6'7", 8'8" linemen. It's pretty hard to see on a tight field. Whereas now, like Doug would set up at, 7 yards, take the shotgun snap, and then he'd drop back another. Like he'd be 10 yards behind but then he could see everything. And that would never go in the NFL, right? So he'd drop back, throw it all over the place, and
is it fair to say that CFL is kind of a little faster game? Like
I don't know. Like the individuals aren't faster, but the game itself is a lot more to the perimeter, right? Like you can get the ball out, guys can, you allow people to get out. Whereas in the NFL, you throw a swing pass or whatever. I mean, guys are closing all the time, and so you're only getting some gains or whatever, right?
Interesting.
So, so I mean, obviously the NFL is the better game. It's the most dominant players, those things. But a lot of those NFL guys would struggle in the CFL.
Interesting. So I've done a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and I've
a little bit. Come on now. You keep doing this every issue, man. You're like a black belt now, man. Come on.
So I've been lucky to grapple with a wide array of people, and I've had, I usually, when I start off a round, if I haven't met someone, I'm like, oh yeah, have you ever grappled before? I did a bit of high school wrestling. Usually I always find people that say I did a little bit. It's usually like, 5 to 10 years, or whatever. But, and so I've had it where, I noticed right away if I had a wrestler, and one of the biggest things is hard to get them on their back. It's hard to flip. I rolled with some football guys, a couple of big football guys. I rolled with one guy. He was a defensive. I think he played professionally 12 years in the CFL, and he was huge. He was a big guy like you, and like terrifying, to be honest, when you're grappling that size. But I couldn't. What I found is I had to move myself around him. He could move me wherever he wanted. And I realized it's like, oh, this guy's moved people professionally for a living. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you is as an offensive lineman, can you like summarize a couple of things? Like people will look at it like the collisions and that, but there's more to it than that. To me, it's like balance, moving foot position, I would think. And then the other side I wanted to ask you about is like the injuries, like, because to me, one of the big things would be fingers, because you're kind of coming fingers up, don't you? Like, is it?
Well, to go back to what my job as an offensive lineman, and the best description I had heard is that you are an energy absorber.
Interesting.
Because you've got these elite defensive linemen across from you, and their job is to get to the guy with the ball, right?
Right.
And so your job is to be able to stay in front of them and absorb all their energy, right? Because if this guy is so good that you can't get him, can't make contact with him, then you're in trouble because he's around you. He's down the side. He's done an arm over. He's done, and so, you're fine with him pushing you back. Like, you don't have to blow people up every play, right? Like, you're not, like at the lower levels, like when I was in high school and then eventually in college, I mean, my job was to just drive people into the ground and make their lives a living hell. But when you get to those higher levels, that ain't happening, man. I mean,
they're all big, they're all strong, right?
So the really good ones are, getting in the way of people all the time. And it's like, okay, I know what this play is. I know where the ball's probably going to go. I know what this guy wants to do. So now I've just got to be able to move and stay in front of him. And that's why the size has gotten continually bigger. And even you'll see how sloppy some of these NFL guys look, where they've got big guts on them, but that's because they can absorb.
They can absorb that.
They can absorb that energy, right? And so, and then you just wear them down because you go 70, 80 plays a game. That's exhausting for a defensive player. And you just so that's kind of the name of the game as an offensive lineman, right? And then you're playing games like if you're passing the ball all the time, you have to play games with your opponent, the guy you're facing every day, because he's got his moves and counter moves, and then I got to have some counters to his counters, so it's a little bit of a mind game, right? And
was there ever time? I imagine this didn't happen so much in the professional, but was there ever times where like someone came out that just surprised you with raw power, or was it so
film study is so intensive in football, and it doesn't. We'd started it in high school, even in the early '80s, right? And so we were filming every other team that we would play, right? So in college, it went to a new level where we have technicians who are breaking down play by play, and then they would send you a package of plays, and and that was part of your job, during the week before the game was to study your opponent and everything, and then the pros, took it to a whole new level. And then the pros, especially the CFL, you're seeing the same guys 3-4 times a year. So then, you start to develop, I know what he does here, he does there. And
a little
not that it always helps because, there's so many moves that he can do, right? So I would, I would know like, okay, which hand I'm going to punch with, or I'm going to take a step there. I'm going to do a short set on him or drop back a little bit and let him come into me. So it was always an evolving, game each time. And then there's just some guys that you just, it was really hard to do anything against. Right.
Really, I would imagine that gentleman you talked about before with the incredible, like the Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Somebody like that must just be an absolute
like
handful.
he would have just been dominating even NFL guys at that level. Right.
Yeah.
And just, as part of your question with the injuries, that's what equals success, is your ability to play through pain to a point where, you can't play because of, like something's torn or something's broken, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I missed one game in 12 years of football, like from high school, college, pros.
That's impressive.
And that was with a second degree medial collateral tear.
Wow.
And so I only missed a week.
Wow. That's incredible.
We put a brace on it and, shot it up. Right.
Yeah.
So,
right.
So that ligament was a mess, but I still had half a season to play. And if I wasn't, I could lose my spot. Right.
The pressure.
And of course, you got sprained ankles, you got broken fingers and sprained thumbs, and you got, a light concussion or this or that, your ability to get out of bed every morning and go to practice, and, and coaches hate it when you don't practice. Right.
I bet,
and so, if you're a borderline player, like I seem to be all the time in the pros, you didn't take a day off because the next guy who moves in practice could be, be your end. And
you're trying to fight for that spot.
And so, but I never had an ACL, or I never had a broken foot, or, those kind of things. I mean, I had lots of sprains and strains and stuff, but I was pretty fortunate. I always laugh with my boys because I had some off-season issues, but a lot of times that was muscle imbalances, and I would get so strong in the squat that I would start having hamstring issues.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
I was just, my quads were massive.
Quads are growing.
But
Yeah.
my,
Yeah.
I hadn't trained my hamstring. And so then I'd have a pull in the winter workouts, and then I'd have to, do those kind of things. But, it's that pain threshold because you're always in pain. And,
I remember, I think I was talking with you, and I've had a little bit of small finger injuries, but that seems like one of the big ones to me, that you, as an offensive lineman, you're like, because you're coming in and trying to slow them down, your hands are coming up, and it would just almost like when a basketball hits the tips of your fingers.
Yeah.
Like
it's constantly. Right? And I've had one thumb rebuilt, and the other one has to be done too.
Jeez. Yeah.
Because the fingers aren't bad. I mean, I've had them dislocated and stuff, but the thumbs, like the joints are gone, and so it's much better now that they rebuilt this one. But,
interesting.
there is a price to pay, for those higher level sports, right?
Yeah.
And
I
don't know what the long term, I can only think of one time that I had that I realized I had a concussion. I'm sure I've told you that story, but it was in college, and we're in the middle of a game, and our quarterback throws an interception downfield, and it's 20 yards downfield, and this big middle linebacker picks the ball off, and he starts running, and I'm near there, and I'm trying to get to him, and he's probably 240, 245 or whatever. I'm my size, and we're coming together, right? And we're heading to get, and all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to run this son of a bitch over, and so he comes straight at me, and I come straight at him, and we smash into each other. And on contact, I'm out.
Wow.
But the next thing I do is I wake up on the bench, and there's nobody around me. I'm like, there's no trainers, there's no team doctors or whatever, and I'm like, somebody must have carried me off, and nobody's paying attention to me. Okay, so I go back into the game and stuff like that. The next series after our defense got it back, and that night I started having these massive headaches and spinning and stuff, and so I went to the hospital, and they hospitalized me for a night, and then just let me go. But we went to watch film the next day, I think it was, or 2 days later. And I'm waiting for this play, and it shows me smashing into this guy, and we're both on the ground. And then all of a sudden I jump up and I run off the field. And then the sideline shot of, shows me kind of sitting there, and all of a sudden sees my head pop up.
Wow.
So I blacked out, but I'd still run off the field.
We're like, jeez, it's incredible. Like I always say, it's incredible what the human body can do. Like when you see these UFC fighters, they get knocked down like a massive kick, and yet they're still fighting, but they're not, it's just instinctual or whatever. And then 20 seconds later they come back, and they're able to carry on. It's absolutely amazing what the human body can endure. And I think, when you look at any professional sport, hockey, or you really see like these guys taking it to the max, and it's impressive, right?
And you do pay a price, I mean, I feel fortunate that I'm not as I wake up in pain every day, but I'm going to be 60, so I think everybody's in pain at this point, so it just takes me a little longer to get going in the morning than I used to.
Get the creaks out when you wake up in the morning.
So I mean, it's that's definitely part of it.
It's an impressive story. I love talking to you about your football. And when you were in Montana, and we'll talk about this hopefully a little bit, because I know you enjoy history, right? You got a degree in American history there? Is that...
You know what? I never big mistake I had is I didn't finish everything. I had to do my teaching year or whatever they call it up here, PDP or whatever. And I never got to it. I said, I'll come back to it. Right. So it was unfinished because I was like, my intentions was to go back, but then football, and then my wife, and we had babies, and so no excuses. But that drove me with my sons was that they had to graduate, with their stuff. But
that makes sense. Yeah, it's I love the idea. The reason I asked, I love the idea of history, and I know that we've had some awesome discussions about it. You've done a lot of reading over the course of your life, and you're doing a lot of traveling now too, and you know, you must see that when you're out like in the countries you've been and you see some of the like the historical places and whatnot. Is there anything that sort of stands out?
You know what? Every trip overseas, I get excited, you know, because I mean, we're such a young, like we're just babies here in Canada, right? I mean, as far as, you know, white people, you know, coming to Canada, we're just babies. But I mean, we're standing. Where was it? That really hit home. One of the first trips we did, and we're in southern Italy, and we're in Lecce, I think it was, and there was this excavation going on, and they'd been digging out this ground for a new bank in the city, and you know, there's high rises around and everything else like that, and I guess what happened was that all of a sudden one day it was like, you know, the excavator hit something, right? And so then they start moving around, and then they kept going and stuff, and when we got there, they had, you know, exposed a half of a stadium.
Oh wow!
And it was all marble, and you know, they had gladiator fights going there. And it was like 15,000 seat capacity or something like that.
Oh wow!
And nobody was excited about it because I mean, everywhere they turn, there's something 2,000 years old, and it just makes the contractors, you know, like angry.
Yeah, now they're like, and we got to stop construction here. And
but just like everywhere we go, and you know, we were in Panama this winter, you know, in January, and you know, we went to this one spot outside of Panama City, and you know, the oldest church, it was the second oldest or the oldest church in the Americas, Catholic Church in the Americas, 1512 or something, or 1520. Wow. You know, like and just like just the madness of how old everything is, right? And you know, Italy was mind blowing. Everywhere you turn, there was, you know, the stuff that's only 1,000 years old is abandoned. You know, like I mean, you know, you know. That's
what I was going to ask you, because when I think of football, I've only been to one NFL game. I love to go to more, but I went to the Seahawks game, and I remember walking in the stadium, and it's a loud stadium, like the fans are loud, and they're kind of known for that. And I just thought, man, this might have been what it was like walking into the Coliseum.
Well, here's a great story, because one of the things we did was we went to the Coliseum in Rome. We'd done the Vatican and Trevi Fountain and all this stuff, but the big one for me was going to be the Coliseum, and we paid extra for the gladiator experience.
Oh man!
And so you got to walk out onto the fighting ground.
So awesome, yeah. Oh,
and
man.
it's just like, and you look up, and it's just like, oh my God, this is no different than playing in San Francisco or whatever, right? I mean, and all the lower levels are marble, and they all had the family names inscribed in the seats, and you know, they had all the poor people sections that were more vertical and steeper, but they had running water bathrooms, you know, at the Coliseum.
That's so incredible.
And you know, just the vast, you know, and I think they said it was almost 60,000 capacity or something like that. And what they've done is that half the floor is there, you know, where they did their fighting, and then the other half is exposed, where all the support staff was down, like where all the animals were kept. Like you remember in the movie Gladiator when the tigers come out. Yeah, well, that's real. Like that, they had them all in animal cages underneath these floors and stuff, and the water and the, you know, all this stuff, and it's just like, oh my Lord, like this is
so incredible. Yeah. Like when you know, I think sometimes because we don't have video of that, you know, you don't have photos, it's hard to imagine. You sometimes think, oh, they didn't do things very well. But when you look at that, that's incredible. Like they probably weren't that different from us. Even though
the Roman stuff, like to be around, you know, none of our stuff here is going to be around in 2,000 years.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing that's going to be, you know,
wood frame house.
Exactly. But the Romans were unbelievable. I mean, it was just, you know, everywhere you turn, you know, and that's what I've really become passionate about, is these experiences, you know, around the world, because every country, you know, we've got them here in Canada, but I'm kind of leaving, like I've done a ton of BC. My parents, when I was a kid, I mean, we traveled all over the place and into Bella Coola and Fort Nelson and, you know, Dawson Creek, you know, all this stuff. So I've seen a lot of BC. But for right now, in what, you know, you call your go-go years, you know, I want to see the world, right? And I want awesome experiences and everything. And when I'm, in my 70s and I don't feel like being on a plane for 11 hours or whatever,
yeah.
then I'll buy a camper van and we'll go,
Sure.
we'll do Canada,
Yeah.
right? But I just, Chris, when he was
Chris-
on your earlier podcast,
Chris Mark there, yeah.
and I feel exactly the same as he does, is that everywhere you go in the world, 99% of the people are great. The people just living their lives and they're good people, right?
That's what struck me about that podcast, is just like how amazing, he's going to these places like the Namibian desert, or and the people are awesome. And you get this impression that, it's going to be like, obviously you have to be aware, you have to do your due diligence wherever you are. I mean, even in Vancouver, you gotta be careful where you, and so you do, but it was really refreshing to hear him talk about how incredible the people were in all the incredible countries he's been at, right?
Yeah. And then some countries, the people might be not quite as friendly because they're tired of tourists or whatever, but still, it's just like we haven't had anybody be rude to us. I mean, I love Americans. I love, we just got back from, spending almost 6 weeks in the States and enjoyed every day. Right. But, whether we were in Panama or we were in Italy or Spain or Portugal, it's just a positive experience. Right. And awesome. Maybe we're going to have a negative thing sometime or whatever, but, it's been like an awakening, because
that's so awesome.
We'll talk to friends of ours who are scared. They won't even go to the States.
It's very common.
And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're watching Fox too much.
Yeah, exactly.
CNN about how, there's a civil war going to happen,
we were in Austin, Texas in September, and then we went down to Galveston and that area. That's kind of what I was asking you a little bit about the American history, because there's so much down there. And we went to San Antonio. We got to go to the Alamo, which was so cool. It's weird because the Alamo is right. I thought it was going to be in the, like in the desert, but it was right in the heart of the city.
Is it San Antonio or whatever?
Yeah. It's like right, and it's cool. They've got a great display. I was enthralled with like reading about the history of it, but it was awesome. We had a great time in Texas. It was incredible.
Americans do their national parks and monuments so well.
Amazing.
Like, I don't know if you've been to Custer's Battlefield.
No.
In Billings. It's an hour outside of Billings, Montana, and it's a great site. Like, they've changed it over the years from like, it was an awful massacre to now, they have a balanced display there.
Okay.
But they had gone in and x-rayed all the battlegrounds and found the skeletons that were buried. So they were able to place headstones of all the U.S. soldiers who died and where they were on the hillside. And so you start at the bottom and you see how the whole battle evolves.
Oh wow!
And then right to where the last stand was, where Custer and some of his men. But however many hundreds of guys they lost or whatever. But it's really surreal. Like, I mean, I haven't seen anything like it.
Yeah,
but,
that sounds incredible.
But we love the national parks in the States. Yeah. I mean, we whether like this last trip we had gone through Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota is mind blowing. They've got like the Black Hills and the Badlands and the Mount Rushmore and all that stuff. Yeah, and then we went down to Utah, and they've got their Mighty Five, Zion.
Yeah, you did Zion too.
Zion and Arches and Bryce Canyon and
so
Canyon.
Cool.
Like, I mean, they're all just amazing because you can drive right up to them, right? Yeah, and then you get out and experience it, right?
And, so cool.
I mean, I know we have all those things in BC, but they're really hard to unless you're helicoptering into some of these areas.
Sometimes too, having done a bit of hiking and whatnot, like it's beautiful. I love British Columbia is incredible, but like sometimes with the dense forest, you don't get that. You can't, I would imagine Montana, or you can see for like Grand Canyon.
Utah is probably my favorite state. Like there is nothing like Utah.
Really, I didn't know that.
Like these parks, they're all different, and they're. We just got to experience the Grand Canyon, which is another just mind blowing, like nothing like it, right?
Yeah.
So
I haven't been to Grand Canyon, but we when we went to Vegas, we actually went out into the desert and did some of the hiking in the desert. That's incredible. So nothing like the Grand Canyon, but it's like a taste of what it might be like. So I can just imagine. Do you have some like places that like a bucket list still that you want to go to, or?
Yeah, we're this is a goal one, because I mean we got to train even harder now. Like we've trained for 6 months to do the Grand Canyon hike that we just did. But for my 60th, I'm hoping to do the Tour de Mont Blanc, which
Okay.
is in France.
Oh, cool.
And it covers 3 countries, France, Italy, and Switzerland. And you
Oh,
do a
wow.
170 kilometer mountain trek.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
it's
gonna
all,
be-
and they've got all these, what they call refugios and little hotels and stuff. And so you're hiking 5 to 7 hours a day through these mountain ranges,
Yeah.
so,
Oh, wow.
so that's a bucket list. But yeah, the other bucket list stuff though, I mean, an African safari,
That'd be
that's
incredible. Yeah.
we saw Bob and Curry and his wife, the pictures from theirs, they just got back, and just, I mean,
Beautiful.
there's so much of the world. I mean,
Yeah.
we're going to be in England and then going over to Austria and Slovenia and that in this summer, which we're really looking forward to, because there's some tours, like a walking tour we're doing, and then a biking tour. What are some of the other bucket list stuff? I mean, I want to go to Iceland.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's something I want to go
Yeah.
see the volcanoes.
That'd
and
be
things
so
like that.
cool. Yeah. Just incredible landscape.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily turned on by big cities anymore. I've done Rome, and I've done,
Sure.
some of those
Yeah.
Venice and Florence and some of those things, and the Spanish cities, Lisbon. But, right now it's just about like the active expedition, active
Sure.
adventures,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we're hiking and that. So
Yeah, I like the idea of both. One thing I was sort of thinking is when we talked about, going into retirement, it seems like you've sort of found that next sort of chapter. And I'm I think about a year and a half away from retirement. And that's kind of what I'm starting to plan. And, again, Jocko Willink, he has his company, Echelon Front. We were watching a leadership seminar, and it actually happened to be about getting ready for retirement, and it was geared towards emergency services. And I think that it's something that isn't often talked about enough, is like, and what they were saying, it was actually Navy SEALs running this seminar, or webinar. They said it's a good idea about a year and a half out, start thinking about what your bucket list ideas were. Would you recommend that for guys?
The fire service is awful. Nobody talks about, things like that. And I'll play golf or do this or whatever, but you can't do that. And I heard this shocking stat, and there's a problem with stats now, is that, I can't verify this right or wrong, but the latest stuff out of the US was that retirees only spend like 15% of their retirement savings.
Interesting.
Before they're, not doing anything or whatever, because they're frightened, of the stock market collapsing, or they're, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. And that's one of the things that's a beauty for us, emergency services, because you've got your pensions.
Sure.
And if you do things the right way, you're never going to run out of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So, I think that you have to go into a mindset of attacking retirement, and whether that's, a new hobby, a new career, a new, or travel, mine is travel. But I'm doing everything based around that. Right.
Yeah,
So I'm either seeing my kids or we're traveling.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of time for anything else right now. So
you worked your whole life. So you want to enjoy that next chapter. And one of the Navy SEALs were saying in their thing is, because they go through that too, right? They come out of an intense career, and one thing they were saying is maybe try to also find, it doesn't have to be this, the same thing you were doing, but something similar where you find a group of people that are kind of like-minded, maybe whatever you might be into, could be mountain biking or whatever, just to have that outlet. And rather than like, maybe, becoming, in your house by yourself and not having a network of people around you. But did you find like that's something that like,
Well, I realize now that, our lives are broken up into chapters,
right?
And so if you're living in the past and not making a new chapter, then you're in a dead zone.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Like, it's not a comfort zone, it's a dead zone, right?
That's exactly what the SEALs were saying.
And so when we got to that retirement point, and once COVID cleared up and stuff, we said, man, I had my, youth is one chapter. And then I had my football career was another chapter. And then the firefighting and raising a family. was another chapter. And so we're now at this new chapter, and I want something unique. I want, you know, I want something that I'm just going to smile about,
Yeah.
when I can't
Yeah.
do those things anymore.
Yeah. And
right?
something to look forward to.
Because I was in this, I won't call it a rut because I really enjoyed it, but I loved my acreage. I loved raising animals and having a garden and being with my kids and all this stuff and maintaining a pool, all this stuff. And then, but when everybody was gone and we're sitting there going like, well,
just you two.
What tomatoes I'm going to grow this year isn't really what I'm not excited about. And that's when we made a big change and sold and downsized, and everything's been geared toward that. There's a great book. Is it Bill Perkins? I think it is. A Die with Zero, and it's not just a financial book, but he is a financial guy. But his basic premise is that you need to get to the point of death where you got zero left, like I've done it all as much as I can do, and I'm not wasting my retirement because man, it's not like you've got another chapter necessarily after that. You're gone. Everybody says they're living longer and all this stuff, but with our careers, there's no guarantees. When I was diagnosed with a heart arrhythmia, 6-7 years ago, and it's been fine, right? I'm on medication. I've never been hospitalized. I was never, ended up never being like I've got it, but as long as I'm on medication, it doesn't affect me.
Right.
But that just opened my eyes to like, man, I'm a diagnosis away, or I'm this or that, or, and it'll be gone. And then what have I got to talk about in this chapter of my life? So I think you can't just live off, and say, oh, I'm just going to hang out with the guys I worked with, for the rest of my life or whatever, right? So,
I when I got into the fire service, obviously life-changing for me. I didn't have really much of anything, and ever thankful to the city of Delta and local 1763, which is our local, and actually the other fire departments too, because I have friends in other fire departments that helped me and guided me along the way. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I did things like in life and all the way through. I don't want to get to like sort of my deathbed and look back and go, man, I wish I had done a little bit more. I wish I'd played guitar, or I wish I had gone mountain biking. I kind of, obviously within reason, we all, you don't have a ton of money to do everything, but you have to manage that a little bit. And so I think like that's kind of why I find that I transitioned to retirement. An important discussion is because you want to maximize and have fun, and like life's precious.
Yeah. Right? And you're in these different chapters again. With 5 kids and, my daughters and that, it was all in, right? Like we didn't travel at all, hardly, right. We had lots of experiences, but it was the different kinds of experiences. Right. And so,
I remember you coming to work in a tiny little Toyota Tercel and this big 6'8" guy getting out of this little but you were operating on a budget, right? And and it was you had those cars, and I'm the same way. I would drive like a little Honda Fit or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I'm not 6'8". It's not quite as intimidating.
Well, that's why I'm really proud of my sons because they all are doing really well financially. Well, my son who's a cop who owns a house and he drove a Corolla till it was 370,000 kilometers, right? It was an 03. Like he wasn't, financially they're responsible and, but it's to go back to that book, it's not about just not having any money at the end, but it's also about just no regrets, right? And just saying like, man, you're hammering it and you're, just doing what you can do, right? And so, and then you have to decide how you're going to get there. And if my wife and I realized that, we were going to be comfortable financially with maybe a trip a year or something like that, but we had to make some sacrifices to get to where we wanted to go. And so then we got rid of our place, and that's tough for people. I know there's people who will never give up their family home or whatever. But,
lots of memories there.
But we said, well, it's, time to make new memories, right? And that freed up, the finances to have the extras, right? And I try and tell that to a lot of guys at work that are, saying, oh, I got to work way longer than I
Yeah.
do, and things like that, the money's there if you've done things the right way.
Yeah.
And the younger generation might be a different story, but I mean, for our generation, if you've owned a home and you've paid your bills and,
Yeah.
done what you've done,
You've got that.
we have this wealth available to us that is only going to go to your kids if you keep your house for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Right. So
Do you find too, I know we chatted a little bit about this, something I think is important to consider in retirement is like, you're like sort of almost like your first 10 years, your next 10 years, and your last 10 years, and like planning that out. Like, cause you're like, you might not be, I don't know, climbing Kilimanjaro when you're like 85, and
Yeah.
is that something that you're kind of strategically looking at, or?
And I used the term the go-go years before. And so and this isn't something we made up, but we read, and you have your go-go years, your slow-go years, and then your no-go years.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Man, you don't see many people over 75 doing much.
No.
I mean, there are exceptional people,
Sure.
but I can't count. I can't count myself as like, oh, when I'm 80, I'm going to be, doing this or whatever. I don't know what my body's going to tell me.
Yeah, you might not be hiking through the Grand Canyon.
Well, no, exactly. And so everything I'm doing right now is to push ourselves and our experiences and our senses and our physical stuff. So everything now, is to see stuff that we would never have seen, if we didn't do it. And I'm not saying we're not going to take comfort stuff too. Like this Grand Canyon trip, we killed ourselves for 3 days, and then we went to a resort for 3 days in Phoenix. It's out by the pool, right?
Of course, but I mean, you got to have a little bit of both,
so,
right?
Yeah, I mean the challenges of some of these things also just, once again, it makes you uncomfortable. But then the reward afterwards is like, oh my God. Like, I have to tell you this story that about our Grand Canyon trip. And we'd taken this trail down this, what's called the South Kaibab Trail. And there's 2 trails that come off the South Rim that go all the way to the bottom. And so the South Kaibab Trail and then the Bright Angel Trail. And the Bright Angel Trail is, it's a little bit longer trail, but there's water every mile and a half. They have water piped up the canyon and that. So it's all, it's pretty safe, other than you got to climb, as much as you do. The South Kaibab Trail has the mind-blowing views, right? Like where you're sitting out over, 3,000, 4,000 foot, caverns, or you're sitting above the Colorado River and that. And so we said, okay, we're gonna go down the South Kaibab, and just to back it up a bit, the reason we were doing it in late June was because you have to enter lotteries now to go into the Grand Canyon.
Is that right? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And so if you want to camp down in the bottom, you have to enter a lottery.
Interesting.
To get down there, and so ours came up, but it was for June, and we knew it was going to be hot, but so we trained our butts off and that, but. I'll continue the story, but we go down the South Kaibab, and it is amazing. And we're 3/4 of the way down, but then the heat just crushes us.
I bet. How hot
it was 108, 109 degrees on the trail, and there's no water. There's no water on the trail. So you're packing 3-4 liters of water with you. And we're getting low at this point.
You can get through that pretty fast.
Yeah. And we're getting low at this point. And we had dialed in our electrolytes, and we've got electrolyte tablets. We're taking them on a regular, but so all that stuff doing it, but we are getting absolutely crushed. And every little bit of shade, and there's no tree, obviously, there's no trees and stuff, but every once in a while you'll have a little shady spot. And so, and we're just like struggling, and we're like, oh my God, like, I've got my inReach, and I'm like, shit, am I going to have to, am I going to have to push the button? Because that's not what I want to do. Right?
No,
my pride, and
of course,
kudos to Dana. She got through it too. And we get to the bottom, and you cross this black bridge, it's called, and it's one of the 2 bridges in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and the Colorado River's flowing there. Right. Yeah. And so we just basically stagger off this bridge, and we're out of water. We had been out of water probably for 40 minutes or something like that, which is our own fault, right? I mean, we should have carried another liter at least each. And we come off, and we get down the trail, and we're trying to find a trail down to the river, right? And so we just basically are just like these something from an old Western movie, where you finally find water, right? And so we grab our water filters and we throw off our packs and we just both dive into the Colorado River. But what they don't tell you about the Colorado is that when it comes out of, I think it's Lake Mead that it comes out of, but when the water comes out of Lake Mead, it's at like 700 feet deep or something like that. Wow. Oh. So that water's ice cold. Oh. So we go from where we're red flush,
super cooking hot to ice cold.
And I dive in, and Dana's smarter. She just kind of gets into the shallows, but I'm just like fully immersed. And I stopped breathing. Like, really? I mean, the cold has
just sucked it out of you.
Sucked it out of me. Yeah. But the sensory around my skin, I've never felt anything like that. And I don't know if that's what, taking heroin or fentanyl or, I don't know. Like I'd never, like it was like my electrons were just like, like mind blowing. Really? Right.
Just
and so
such
I never,
big
but
contrast.
People drown in that river every year because of that cold and the current, because it takes your breath away. Right. And so I mean, fortunately we were in this little eddy and stuff. And so I was able to stand up, all this
kind
stuff.
Of walk out of there.
But I never experienced, and so that kind of stuff, I challenged myself to coming down. Like it was way harder than I thought because of the heat. And, we were way smarter the rest of the trip. We got meals and we had meals and, took, a day down there and then we hiked back out, but because we took the other trail, we had water every mile and a half. So, we were able to make it up, I won't say without any problems, but it was hard, but we made it out. But, it's those kind of things where a lady came down later that afternoon. She had to get medevaced out because the heat got her so bad. And 2 days after us, a guy in his 60s died on the trail from heat exhaustion.
Really?
So I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound heroic, but it's like, man, it happens all the time.
Sure, right?
But we were so happy once it was done. We were so much pain and so everything else and cramping and doing all this stuff. But it was just like we were just like high-fiving each other.
It's going through those adverse times, even in an adventure or a hike trip, or it really makes you appreciate everything in life even that much more. Like I've been on some very easy, sort of like hunting trips and compared to like what some guys do, right? Some guys are like traveling for 2 days, taking jet boats, they're incredible. But, you don't have running water. You don't have light switches. And when I get home, every time I get home, I'm like, man, get in my bed. It's like, oh, man, this bed's amazing.
That is so true because we're laying in our tent in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and even the nighttime temperatures haven't dropped below 95, right? And so we are basically, and all because of the weight, we had gone ultra light. Like we just had those little accordion foam pads, and we had a sheet, and that's it.
Very little
and
comfort.
So we're laying in this filth and sweaty, and we dive. We gotten into the river and stuff, but all night long we're just sweating and stuff, and so we were pretty feral for 3 days until we got to the very top. We smelled, and we were sweaty, and everything else. But it was like, man, that first shower was just like, oh my god,
feels
like,
so good. And having a light switch you can turn on, or having running water at your disposal.
Like the appreciation, and I think that's one thing that travel allows you to is the appreciation for what we have here.
Absolutely.
We had this amazing experience in Panama, and we were staying in Panama City for a month, and there was a thing you could buy, and you could go out to the San Blas Islands. And I think Chris had mentioned, had dropped the name, but it's off the coast of Portugal and the Caribbean.
Right. Yeah.
And Panama had turned these 900 little islands over to the local indigenous people and gave them autonomy, and just said, okay, they're your islands, right. No government oversight, whatever. So a lot of them have set up, these little tourist things, and so you work your way there to the coast, and they have a boat to pick you up, and we get to this island, this little tiny Gilligan's Island kind of thing, and they've got some huts over the water, and
man, it must be beautiful.
But it was so gorgeous, but it was so simple because you just ate like a fish that they had caught that day, and they had a few beers and a few cans of Coke, but there's no power on the island or whatever, sometimes that simplicity, and then you come from an all-inclusive, which is just like so excessive.
You got everything.
Everybody's complaining because the beer, the steak wasn't properly done or whatever.
Send this back.
But that flipping of like experiences, and then you appreciate what you've got, and running water and everything.
It's huge. Right? I think more people need or should have those experiences if they can, because it really makes you appreciate what you have. When you go from having a little bit of struggle, a little bit of adversity to, oh man, life's pretty awesome when I get home, or and like we've done a great job building our, we have our house, we have our, and even something like a fridge where you have cold food in there. It's it sometimes gets forgotten. We can underappreciate those.
And I've seen. I was listening to a thing with a psychologist on a podcast, and he was talking about how, as humans, a lot of times when your problems get less, you just make more problems, right? Like the smaller things become a problem, right?
Yeah.
So now you're yelling.
There's something to that, I think.
Yeah, and a lot of people will be yelling because their cable TV, the channel is not working properly, or and 50 years ago, or in World War II, you're worrying about all these other things, 100 years ago, you're worrying about smallpox or this or that, and so we've societal wise we've become too spoiled in a lot of ways, right? And so I did
this job in on the Atlantic Ocean. It was a sunken ship that I went and did some rescue standby work for. And we had to meet every day on the dock, and I don't know anyone. And I'm probably the most underqualified guy there. And these guys are like, some of them are like deep sea divers. Like they're like, this is a holiday for these guys, right? Yeah. And for me, this is a huge adventure.
Yeah.
Scary. It's terrifying. We're going out the ocean every day. And they're like, we work on the, 1 degree, like just above zero in the Baltic Ocean with huge waves cutting ships apart. And it's just like, so when I did that for like 12 days. And when I got home and I was going to work, and I love my job. It's been amazing. But I was like, wow, this is so nice compared to what I just went through, where I'm stressed out all day long. And, you're trying to like survive. And like, it was one of those places where there was no looking at your cell phone, because you could die.
Yeah.
Right. You could get knocked off a ship by equipment that, we had this one moment where we were on this barge, and this huge boat came in, and the barge is tied up to the sunken ship. And this boat was coming in to deliver supplies. And I was talking to this really ancient sea mariner guy. He was like an old guy, and he had great stories, and just so enthralling. And I see his eyes light up, and I'm thinking, like, if this guy's eyes are lighting up, like what, I look what's going on here. I look at the boat, and it's coming in pretty hot. And he's like, brace, like grab something. And I'm like, okay. So I grab a railing, and this boat hit this barge so hard, and everybody was got kind of their feet taken out. And then like they had these huge green ropes tied to the sunken ship. When everything kind of stretched out, the ropes went white, and you could hear them like these are like thick, like 4 to 5 inch thick rope. Yeah. And you're just, cringing, thinking you're going to get hit by, whatever. And then of course it all balanced out. But like all these guys are like seasoned vets. And is one thing I always like listen to, like, when we go on calls or whatever, is if someone's an expert in their field and they're nervous about something, like listen intently kind of thing. Right. So, but, coming home from that was, I was very nice to get home. That was
a great opportunity.
It was definitely I felt like, actually you turned me on to this movie, Walter Mitty, The Secret Life. I love that show. Right. Yep. And, that's how I felt. I felt like Walter Mitty going on this little adventure or whatever. Right. But
I want to do everything he did except in the water with a great white.
That's
right. Not what I
want. I'm so stoked to hear that, you found like the traveling and the history and what. Is there any, like, so far in all your travels, like, is there any other things that really stand out, like in your mind, like historically, or that that really kind of blew your mind? Or
I mean, the when we go back to the Roman stuff, because I mean, we were in Spain and Portugal, and they've still got like aqueducts and things that are still standing.
Did you go in the Vatican? Or
we went to the Vatican too, which is so overwhelming.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Everyone, even like Joe Rogan, listen to his part. He's been there. It's just
Yeah. Like
endless.
you only, like if you go for a day, you have time to see one of their museums, and you have to rush through. Like
Really?
if you're going to do the Sistine Chapel, and like I think we did what did we do? The one section we went through was all carpets, like what they
Yeah.
weaved out of gold and all this
Yeah.
stuff. But I mean, there's 8 different sections to the Vatican, and there's an Egyptian one, like the wealth that's there and the
Yeah.
stuff that the church has taken. I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah. Acquired over
it's hard.
history.
It's hard to uh, even comprehend, right? Like I came out of the Vatican and I didn't even know if I enjoyed it because it was so overwhelming.
So much. Yeah. I've heard that from a number of people. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Because I mean, in Florence, like the museums there, like the statue of David is there that was done by Michelangelo, and so you can go and sit and just kind of look, and it's like mind blowing that somebody's hands carved this giant 20 some foot perfect human being, like the striations and the calves, and like
incredible.
There's some just mind blowing stuff, and
I really want to go to Egypt. It was interesting talking to Chris Mark because he has his cycling adventures, and he cycled through Jordan, I think Israel, Jordan, Egypt on one of his trips. And I'd love to go there one day.
Yeah, that's on the list too, like for the pyramids and all that stuff. It's mind blowing that the pyramids are right in the city too.
Yeah,
it's not like you're getting, because I'd heard about a Nile River cruise you could do and things like that, where you go all the way down and stuff. But I mean, that's a little hard right now. It's a pretty unstable area.
Yeah, that's it. You got to again do your research.
Yeah, but we've. I'd like to see Turkey.
Yeah, I heard Turkey's
Turkey is a cheap Greece, really. Greece is really expensive, I've heard, and it's tons and tons of tourists, but it's people that we follow to spend a lot of time in Turkey, and you get the same stuff as Greece, but at a fraction of the price and a lot quieter, right? And so I think I'd like to do Turkey. I mean, I know, explore Slovenia a bit more. We're going to be riding through parts of it this summer, but they have this Julian Alps and these crazy hikes all through there, and so
a couple of the guys at work were saying Croatia is supposed to be incredible, supposed to be just ridiculous beaches.
Like every time I turn the computer on, there's something that does. Oh, we got to go do this, and we got to do that, even England, we're spending 14 days or something in England this summer.
Oh, man,
and we're doing this 100 and some mile Cotswolds way walking. So it's just all through little villages and countrysides, and and a lot of the history, country history of England, and a few days in London to see, see a few sites and stuff. But and then we're going to Austria, and then we're riding from Austria down to the Italian coast, which is 400 and some kilometers. So shorter days.
Everything's so much closer over there in terms of countries, right?
Well, and the beauty of traveling, especially to Europe, is that they are so dialed in with these tours, where you can pick whatever, whatever kind of tour you want. If you want a guided tour, where you got a guy taking you on hikes or bike rides or whatever, you can pay for that. We're doing, a little bit more like a upscale self-guided tour. So, like when we're in Austria, they take our luggage. We just have to wait a day pack. They've got our bikes ready, and we've got a destination. I think it's average 60K a day or something like that. And you ride, and when we get there, our luggage will be there. The hotel reservation's already done. You just go out and buy a meal, and and so they'll follow that all the way through the tour. And so, I don't necessarily have to do all the planning. I pay somebody to do that, but we also don't want to be in groups right now. We want to be able to stop.
Sure.
When we want to stop.
Do your own thing and maybe grab some food or stop here or there.
Yeah, because initially, like when we first started traveling, we had a travel agent, and they would plan every day for us, and and then we just found it's you know, you're able to do it if you have an open mind, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. So
we're at about an hour and a half. Are you okay for time
yeah,
for now?
yeah, we can go over a bit more.
One question that I've been asking everyone is, you don't drink coffee, but if you were to have a drink of your choice with anyone, alive or past, is there someone that comes to mind and like kind of where you would do that? Or?
Oh, I always thought like Winston Churchill
Right,
would be a guy,
yeah.
or
That's what Stefan said too.
yeah,
I think he'd be incredible too.
just his life. And and he's got his faults and, and imperialism and all that stuff, but just, being in the last cavalry charge of the British Empire, I think it was, and then he's flying on jet planes, as prime minister in the 50s and stuff,
building up for D-Day.
And to step in a losing situation like that, where they basically dump the government on him in 39 and just say, well, we're out. You can surrender to the Nazis, and just.
I said to Stefan, I said, I guess, you could, maybe it would be tea you'd have with him. He laughed at me. He said, no, that it would be some sort of alcohol.
Yeah. Like a whiskey or something or bourbon or whatever. Yeah. So, that guy jumps, and of course, there's some other figures that I guess,
I've been sort of saying that I'm big on Napoleon. I'd love to, sit with him for an hour, even, maybe a couple of days outside of one of his great battles and just pick his brain. And, and like the interesting thing, I said this before, is that it wasn't just his warfare that was interesting. He was, I think he was quite a quirky individual, but the life he led even outside of that was mind-boggling. It's like I say it's like 100 lives in one. I think at 24, I think he was like a general.
Yeah.
It's just like, what?
Yeah. The opportunity arose to a guy that was ready for greatness, right?
And I think if you take that guy almost any generation or any time in life, probably similar, he's going to rise through the ranks.
Yeah. Because I saw something one time where, they were showing like the generals who, like the guys with the most battles that they won as generals. And I think the next general, who was like, Genghis Khan or something like that, had half the wins. Like Napoleon had like 53 or I can't tell exactly,
no,
but he won just battles after battle. He just happened to lose, and it was it wasn't a given that he was going to lose Waterloo, right?
Even then, and I think that was part of it. That I went and saw the movie that came out recently, and there was like good and bad to that movie, I guess.
Yeah, but, I was a bit disappointed with the movie myself.
Yeah, but, I was a little bit too, and I was I'm listening to his autobiography. It's this huge 45 chapter book or whatever, but the thing that struck me with him, he was knocking it out of the park for 50 or 60 battles. And then, I don't know whether it was ego or mistiming or whatever, just finally caught up to him. And
because there's lots of questions about, what was he having health issues that day or, this or that, because but Wellington was one of the top generals of all time too. The guy won battle after battle. He beat all of Napoleon's generals, and so it was two great guys facing each other. And
one thing that fascinated me about him is that he would be like in Egypt, conquering Egypt, and his men are, suffering and things are going on. And meanwhile, he's writing his love letters to his, his wife Josephine, who was this this great general that's got, thousands of men under command, but the one thing was his wife was just he just loved her so much that it's an incredible story. Really.
No, for sure. That great, is it the great man who makes the history, or is it the history that allows the man to have this the chance, right? And just same with Churchill, right? If he had accepted a role in the government in the 30s that was offered to him all the time, he would have been in the government that collapsed, right? And so and somebody else would have been given that job. And so, without Churchill, what does history look like?
How does it turn out?
Is there a Jew left alive in Europe?
Do the Germans just take over the world at that point?
Well, they probably don't take over the world, but they take over England, and they can then turn all their attention to Russia. I don't think they would ever have invaded the U.S. or whatever. That's not happening because with the oceans and stuff like that.
Fair.
That's my opinion. But the history of Europe and Russia would have been radically different
Sure.
if England had
Yeah.
surrendered.
It's funny, like timing, you know, say timing can be everything, you know, and like for Churchill not taking that position and then getting taken in is, you know, obviously things lined up well for everyone. Well, that's awesome, buddy. Any other last thoughts in terms of like, you know, stuff that we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, no,
great.
I know it's been a bit meandering for me, but you know, it's been a real pleasure though.
Yeah,
I
man.
appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for coming on. We've had lots of great conversations over the years.
Yeah.
And, you know,
well, I've learned from
pleasure.
you as much as, you know, you say you learned from me. So, I mean, you know, you were always a pleasure to, you know, work with.
Thanks, buddy. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's good. Oh, right on. Thanks, brother.
Right.
That's awesome, my friend.